Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Maggi, a chef and culinary mentor with Basics Market. And on this wintry, blustery night, we're going to have some delicious soup and bread. And it is very satisfying to make some soup and bread when it's a little chilly out. And so we're having here in Oregon, we're having a little bit of a cold front, and it's been really enjoyable baking and getting stock prepared for the soup. And then we're going to put all that together with this class. The recipe for this class and other classes and other recipes that aren't even attached to classes are available at our Basics Market website. And if you have any questions as we go along, please type them in and we will answer them as best we can live tonight. So let's go ahead and get rolling with this soup and bread. Soup and bread is a classic pairing, makes for a wonderful meal, and refrigerator should be able to put a soup like this together. And one of the things I'm really excited to bring to you with this class is a really good, just a basic chicken stock. And so what I've got going here in this pot is a chicken carcass. So off, and I've reserved some of that for I'm going to put that in the soup. I'm going to stick those roasted bones in the pot. You want to simmer those bones in the water. You don't want it to be a crazy boil because your clarity of your stock will diminish with that. It'll get a little more cloudy. But you want to just keep it at a low simmer. And you can see I have these bubbles rising to the top. And this we're going to go ahead and skim off. As this at least 2 hours, you want to go from 2 to 4 hours with a chicken stock like this, ideally. And another point is start with cold water. Use cold water to cover your bones, and this will facilitate also more clarity in your broth. A roasted chicken. We have these delightful whole roasted chickens in the delis at our Basics Market. So I had them roast one for this class, and I'm using the roasted bones. You can also make a lovely chicken broth with fresh bones. If you're doing, cutting the meat off the bones for something else, go ahead and you can either roast the bones by themselves on a sheet pan and then use them, or you can just put them in fresh. Now, a roasted bone chicken stock, it's going to have a little more depth of flavor. It has those roasty notes as well as a little more color. So both have their properties there. So I'm doing the ekume, and this is one of the first things I ever learned in the kitchen from my father. He would let me ekume the soup, and that's just the French term for where you're pulling these bubbles and any extra fat that rises to the top of the stock. And you just want to pull those things off, and that also will help with the clarification of your broth stock. Okay, so this has been going for, I had this going for several hours today. And as the stock cooks, the liquid's going to reduce a bit. So I add water occasionally. And as the stock reduces, it's going to get stronger in flavor. And, and some people even we'll take the bones out and then reduce the stock further. So it's really up to you to how concentrated you want your stock. So after, and we're going to be using this stock immediately for this soup. This is a real simple, just kind of get into it soup. So we've made our stock and we're going to right away utilize it, or pretty much right away. Of course, you can chill a stock, and when you chill the stock, if you do chill your stock, you'll find some fat solids will rise to the top, and then you can skim them off at that point, and that will make a lighter broth stock. And I'm using broth and stock interchangeably because there really is not a difference, except sometimes a broth will denote that there's been some vegetable matter put in with the bones, and a stock might just be straight bones. All right, so here's our bones, and you can kind of see what that looks like. And you can see I just used a regular old strainer, strained out the stock there. And now I'm going to get rid of the bones. And for my purposes, I'm just going to save myself some dishes and go right back into the same stock pot. Now, I've baked my bread, and we're going to do the bread next. While the soup is cooking, and it should finish up by the time our bread is ready to roll there. So here's the stock, and I'm just going to set this aside. And I'm warming up my stock pot, my soup pot. Now the stock pot has become a soup pot. Okay. And here's a tablespoon of olive oil. So with this soup, we have our beautiful fresh chicken stock, and there's really nothing like a good fresh chicken stock. It has so many healthful properties, as well as it being delicious and just really nourishing and a great comfort food, and you can use it in so many ways. So it's great if you have a roasted chicken. Like if I roast a chicken, I'll make a stock that same night and just get it done, and then chill it, and then I can use it that stock in all sorts of ways. So for this soup, I've chosen some of the vegetables that we describe in the recipe, and you can really use any vegetables you like. But when I'm approaching a soup, I usually follow a method of ingredients, the order I'm going to cook the ingredients in, and it has to do with the rate at which different vegetables cook. So I always start with a mirepoix, and a mirepoix is simply carrot, onion, and celery, and that's the basis of so many sauces and soups, right? And in this mirepoix, I've also added some garlic and some leek. Now, I'm going to go ahead and get that going. So those are the first things we want to put in our soup pot. And as far as the leek go, if you're using a leek, and leek and chicken is just a real classic and beautiful combination, right? And the top of the leek, the green part, it's really nice to put into your stock as you're making it. And you can put aromatics. You can put onion, celery, carrot that'll kind of sweeten your stock. You can put a leek green, and that will give wonderful flavor to your stock. So it doesn't just have to be the chicken bones, you can add some things to it to get some more dimension in the flavor. Okay, so we just saute these guys for a while. So in this soup, we have a little bit of garlic. I have one clove in there, and I just wanted to demonstrate cutting up another clove, and this method of putting the garlic clove with its peel in a little bit of water just for a couple minutes, and this really helps it to not stick to your knife or to your fingers. And so that's kind of a nice little trick with the garlic. And then with a clove of garlic,
I like to cut it across and then across the other way to get it going into a mince. And it looks like we have our first question of the evening. Yes.
Would like you to repeat the French term that you mentioned earlier, removing that stuff on top of the.
Oh yeah, so someone would like to revisit the écumé. And écumé is where we're skimming from the top of a stock pot. And you're just getting sometimes if you're doing like a really strong stock, like with beef or pork bones, there's a lot of impurities that will be rising to the top. With roasted chicken bones, fresh chicken bones also, you'll get even more, you'll get more stuff to kind of skim off. With a roasted chicken, a lot of that stuff has already kind of been cooked out with the roast, so you won't get as much to écumé, again, is the term off the top. And so yeah, that's the part of the French lesson for today. The other would be mirepoix, and mirepoix is the celery, onion, and carrot mixture that is the basis of so many dishes. So I'm going to go ahead and I had one clove in there, and there's the other clove. I just want to get this stuff softened, so it takes a couple minutes. And meanwhile, we'll go ahead and have the next thing where we'll put in our kind of the rest of the vegetables in order of how they need to cook. So I have some potatoes and sweet potatoes here, and I have some mushrooms. And these things generally take a little longer to cook. So I'm going to go ahead and throw those in next. And then let's go ahead and look at some of the ingredients that we put in so far and just do a quick knife demo. I do have a knife skills class coming up next month. And if you're interested in getting more into knife skills, please tune in for that. Yeah, and then just another note on making chicken stock. Sometimes I just take a whole chicken and put it in the pot, cover it with water, and let that cook. Cook the meat right in the pot, and that gives you even an extra rich stock as well. And then you can just pull that boiled meat off, and it's a really easy way to cook a chicken and get a rich, flavorful broth. So keep that in mind. You can just pop a whole chicken in the thing. But this recipe is designed to sort of take care of a chicken after you've roasted it. All right, so here we're just looking to create surfaces on the vegetable, flat surfaces that are stable for cutting. And so with the carrot, there's a couple ways there's like that I just did, which is I went down, I had made a nice base and went across. You can also just cut a little sliver off, and then you have all this stable stuff to work with. And you can then go ahead and dice across that way. And notice that my blade is held between my thumb and forefinger, and I'm just kind of balancing the remainder of my fingers on the handle of the knife. But most of my control is right here, and that is how I want it. All right, so that's the carrot. The onion, I have half the onion in here. Here's the other half. So I just cut off the root end or the stem end, and then I have the root end still attached. And this is a great way to get the peel to come off. And then you have all this root will hold the rest of your onion together, and you just want to cut along the line that's there naturally of the onion, and then across, and you'll get a dice right away. And that's a really nice way to quickly dice an onion. So that's the rest of that onion. And then I had some celery in there, right? And celery, just going to cut again along with the natural lines. You know, vegetables are really, it's just all about kind of looking at how the vegetable is made and following the lines that makes the most sense to sort of take it apart, right? So there's the celery in there too. So we're getting a lot of nice vegetables in. And I'm probably going to have much more than 4 cups. Vegetables, I just can't stop adding vegetables. They're so good. And then I have a leek. And then the leek, of course, I cut off the green, right? You want to cut your leek right up to where the green starts there. That's where it starts getting tough. And cut the root end off. Then you've got this here. And with the leek, you'll want to cut it. And then often leeks will have a lot of dirt in there. Or dirt, sand, and mud, because that's what they're grown in. This is a really nice clean one right off the bat, which is great. But then the leek, again, you just follow those lines across. Then you can throw this in like a kitchen strainer and get and rinse it really well, and you'll get all the sand and mud out. Okay, so we've gotten up to that point. All the mushroom, I just like to use my claw. I call this the claw. You got your fingers kind of curled and out of the way, and then you can just zoom right through a mushroom really safely. I'm not using a lot of pressure with the knife because mushrooms are nice and soft. Then just a rough chop, and that's my mushroom. Okay, next I'm going to go ahead and put in some bell pepper and zucchini because these are these are faster cooking veggies. And then with those, we're just going to go ahead and cross. And again, with the knife skills class, I'll concentrate. I'll give you a couple options for getting into a bell pepper, which you're interested in. Also on our website, we have some knife skills stuff if you're interested, just for specific vegetables, and you can scroll through and see if you have any questions about specific vegetable cuts and so forth. The sweet potato, just to go back a little bit, I made a nice stable surface, and then I can cut across and get into a dice that way. So there's that. And it looks like we have a question, yes.
Anthony would like to know, depending on the vegetable type, what cutting you cut for size based on how much vegetable you cook up.
Oh, wow, what a great question. Anthony, thank you. Yeah, Anthony is asking about the size of the cuts, and here I'm using mostly a dice, cut, which is a square, and I'm doing medium dice just because that's, for me, it's easy to eat, and it kind of spreads the vegetable through the soup nicely. And what you want to do is kind of keep everything even as far as your cuts go, but the way that we're putting them into the pot, the order that we're putting them into the pot, they're going to be cooking at the same rate, if that makes sense. So the stuff that takes a little longer goes in first, and then the next layer and the next layer, and then they're all going to come together and be cooked, hopefully by the end of this class, when I try to eat the soup, and if everything's crunchy still, it might be difficult, but if everything goes according to plan, everything will be tender at the same time. The zucchini here, I just took the ends off, and then I have this to play with. You could do like the carrot and cut off a little sliver, and then that creates this good base, and then we can just go across, and then this I'll kind of show you the size dice that I'm looking at with this soup, and you can do any size you want really, but I would recommend for a soup like this kind of a medium dice for everything to cook evenly. So there's that soup. All right, so that's just a quick little knife skill thing, and like I said, next month we'll get more in depth with the knife skill, and we do have one knife skill class up already that has some stuff on there. And so I have some leafy greens. I really like kale. Kale's so delicious, good year round, and pretty. I have purple and green, and we're going to save our greens for the end. Also, I have some chicken that's chopped up, and I'm going to from the roasted chicken I have. I pulled the meat off, chopped it up a little bit, some of the meat, a portion, and then we're going to go ahead and put that in at the end because basically we're just warming that up. The greens cook really quickly. I have some beans. So these are black-eyed peas just out of a can. Another favorite of mine is the Great Northern bean. Is a good white bean that would be nice with the soup. I think the black-eyed peas will be really nice. And it's a can and they're already cooked, or if you cook some beans and have some left over, put them in the soup. So really you can just mix and match stuff that you like to eat. And grain-wise, I really went crazy here. I have 3 different grains. I have some pearl barley, which is really good in soup. It folds up nicely, has a lovely chew, and you can see how large it gets after you cook it. And you simply boil pearl barley, simmer it in some little bit of salted water, or a good amount of salted water because it does expand. Quinoa, especially if you're doing a vegetarian soup, quinoa is really nice. A lot of nutrients, proteins, and the flavor is beautiful. And it can even be used kind of as a thickener in the soup because it gets really, really nice and soft. And again, you can see quinoa expands like by 5 times. It's a great expander. And here is something beautiful, red rice. And this stuff is just gorgeous. I was looking for a lot of color with this soup, so I chose things that would give me a wide variety of color, kind of brighten up the cloudy day. And also winter squash is wonderful in a soup like this, and you just put that in with your potatoes, sweet potatoes at that stage, which was the second stage of vegetables, right? That went in. Okay, so that soup, that stuff is all nicely kind of softened in our first saute here. I haven't added any salt or seasoning to this. I have some herbs, and so I'm going to go ahead and throw some of these herbs in at this point. I have some thyme, and I just picked this right out of our little herb garden in front of the kitchen I'm working in here. I have some sage and I have some thyme, and I also grab some chives, which are just starting, some lovely spring chives, and I'm going to put those on the top of the soup, and that will be really nice. So here's just pulling this stuff off the stem and giving it a chop. And you can use any herbs you like. Dried herbs will also work in the soup. Anything you can get your hands on that you like to eat, and throw it in the pot. Again, just a great way to use up this and that. If you have like a bag with just a little rice in it, cook that rice up and make soup. Make soup, make everyone happy. All right, and bread. So I'm going to go ahead. And get back to the seasoning. So that was some herbs and some aromatics, aromatic herbs. I haven't seasoned the broth. You don't want to season your stock or broth, whichever term you like to use. You don't want to season your stock beforehand, in that you want to leave it pretty neutral, and then you can season it any direction you want. And also, if you start adding salt while you're still cooking those bones, you can get a really concentrated sodium taste. Don't get too salty, so don't do it. Just wait until you're seasoning your soup. It's going to get a little quieter in here, I think. I am going to keep jabbering away, but the soup will stop sizzling, I guess. So I'm going to hold off on the grains, the chicken, and the kale or greens. This could be spinach, this could be chard, this could be mustard greens. Now for the bread. So bread is really fun to make. And this is a lovely sandwich loaf. Okay, that's one that I baked earlier, and we'll try that in a moment. So to start, we're going to go ahead and get some flour. We're using all-purpose flour here. And 1 packet of active dry yeast. And so this sort of yeast was only just invented in 1943 by a Freshman. And before that, there, people were using yeast and bakers were using yeast, and they were getting it from brewers who would skim it off the top of their beer or what have you and give it to the baker. And so often you'd see a brewery and a bakery next to each other, and it was that symbiotic relationship of the yeast. And before that, of course, there's sourdough, and people were pulling yeast right out of the air. And I really enjoy making sourdough still. Of course, once the commercial yeast became available, it really changed how we bake, and it made the whole bakery industry really consistent. And you started getting big producers of baked goods, yeasted baked goods. So this is a sandwich bread, so it's going to have a good tight crumb. We're adding Lulabelle's butter, and so this is our own brand of butter made from the organic milk from our own dairy cows. We do cheese and butter, milk, cream, and it's really great butter. I love working with it, and I'm going to eat some on the bread as well. So for this, you will need 1 1/4 cups of warm, lukewarm water. And my test for when I'm growing the yeast, which is what you're doing, you're bringing these guys back to life. Yeast is like a living organism, and once it starts breathing, that's when your bread rises. And so it likes body temperature water. So I always just check my water with my hand, and I want it the same temperature as my hand. And that's an ideal temperature for the yeast to start to come back to life, reanimate. It's the reanimator here. And so I used a whisk for my beginning stages with the bread. And again, I'm going to stage this out to how I would make any bread or yeasted dough recipe. Water, then the yeast, and then that's when I'll feed it some sugar, if sugar is in the recipe, which we are using sugar here. Sugar is optional. If you don't want sugar, a sweeter type bread, you don't need to add the sugar. Sugar will give it a little bit of a softer crumb, and also the yeast will grow really quick with sugar. So when you add sugar to the yeast, it'll take off a little bit quicker. So I have the sugar, and if, at this stage, you could proof the yeast if you want, and that's just making sure, proving that it's alive, and that's where you wait till some bubbles appear, and that usually takes 5-10 minutes, which we just don't have that kind of time. So I'm not going to do that today. I'm positive that this yeast is going to work for us. And now I have a cup measure. And so we're going to go ahead and put a cup of flour, and this recipe takes about 3 cups of flour. I'm leveling the flour right out of the bag. And that just simply means getting a level measure, which is important with baking. Baking, is all about science, right? And that's what's fun about it. Okay, so I put that first cup in, and then this is where I'm going to go ahead and put my salt. And I have that 2 teaspoons of salt. And I'm going to go ahead and whisk it and get all the lumps out. Yeah, and their bread has been around for over 10,000 years. The first evidence of bread was from 10,000 years ago, and then recently some evidence from 14,000 years ago was found of yeasted bread making. Yeast in general, it has been discovered has originated in China, and all yeast is sort of related, and it all came from this source in China at one point. many, many thousands of years ago. And I thought that's something I learned recently, and I thought that was pretty interesting. Okay, so we've got our 1 cup of flour, and now we need more cups. I got rid of my speaker. Okay, so we're doing 2 more cups, and so for the second addition, I'm going to whisk as well. And now it's going to get a little bit sticky. So this is where I switch to a wooden spoon. So a wooden spoon is really great for dough work. And another tool that I would highly recommend if you're working with dough as a bench knife, and that's just this guy here. I always keep one around for cleaning surfaces or just making, helping with kneading. Okay. How come I keep losing? There it is. I keep getting rid of my cut marker. All right. So now I'm going to go in a little slower with this 3rd cup because we're getting to the point where I'm going to be able to put my dough onto a cutting surface. And in this case, it's a countertop. And you want to put a little bit of flour on your countertop. And you want to get that dough to the point where it's just going to come out of your bowl. And we're going to add a little bit of butter also to this bread. And you could do that, before it gets quite so firm. It's easier. I'm doing it in the style of a croissant, where I'm going to kind of knead it in, layer it in. But that butter, once you start kneading, it's going to really get in there. And I just I did space it out a little bit. I would put that butter in a little earlier if I were you, but since I'm me, I waited till the last minute. And that'll just be easier for you. Okay, so the butter is in there. And that is, again, that Lulabelle's Creamery butter, which is so good. And it really gives a richness and a nice crumb to the bread here. Okay, so now you can see how the bread is come together, our bread dough. And now we're going to knead it. So the kneading of the bread is important in that it develops gluten. And we hear a lot about gluten, and gluten is strands of protein which develop in the wheat. And we actually want gluten here because this is a gluten bread, a wheat flour bread. So we want to develop those strands of gluten. And what those protein strands of gluten do in the bread is they allow the yeast, as it breathes, it's going to exhale the air. And the air is what, that exhalation is what makes your bread rise. And then if you have the gluten strands strong enough, they'll keep that air trapped and not just fall apart and break and let it escape. And that's what gives rise to the bread. So in order to develop the gluten, you're going to knead it. You're going to need to knead. And I need to knead in so many ways. It's one of my favorite therapies. And I really enjoy it. You ideally you want to go about 15 minutes with a knead to really develop that gluten. And if you're kneading by hand, it's unlikely you're going to over knead. Of course, if you're using a KitchenAid, with the hook, you just want to go about 8 minutes. And you need to be really careful about over kneading if you're using a machine because you don't have the feel. That's why I prefer to knead by hand, because I can feel where that dough is, and I can feel if I need to add more flour. You can see this is still that first or the 3rd cup of flour. I've added a couple more maybe a couple tablespoons extra, but not much. So I'm going in slow with that remaining flour. And then I'm also grabbing some extra now. And this is just my board flour. So you want to use as little flour as possible, but you don't want your dough to be really sticky. So you don't want to add so much flour that you're going to dry out your dough. And it's just a matter of practice. And you'll start to get a feel for the ideal spot for the dough, for kneading the dough. And basically, it'll get to a point where it's kind of bouncy, and when you poke it, it pops back. And yeah, that's where you want it. And you can see I'm using my bench knife to kind of pop that dough all up, give it a knead. And so I'm kneading with the heel of my hand, and my kneading style is kind of a circular motion, and that's what works for me. You might have your own style, and that is for you to discover. All right, so let's pretend I've kneaded this for like 15 minutes and it's super bouncy and all that. And I could probably get away with this and it would make a fine loaf of bread and at this point, but it is still a little bit sticky. But for the sake of our class, let's start. So here I have a lightly oiled bowl. Yes, we have a question.
Sonia would like to know if you should add water if you put too much flour in accidentally.
Sonia wants to know if you put too much flour in the dough while you're kneading, I assume, if you should add water. I think, that might be like when you're mixing the dough in the bowl, you can add more water if it feels like if for some reason you added too much flour and it feels like you need a little extra moisture. And in the beginning, like when you have that 1 1/4 cups of water, that's not set in stone. If you use extra water, you'll just need extra flour and you'll have extra bread. I mean, bread is one of these wonderful things. That yeast will just keep multiplying and it will inhabit more dough than just this, so it can keep growing, and you could make more bread. If you add more water, it's really malleable. But on your countertop, that could get tricky, and I just think you're unlikely to add too much flour unless you're just really kneading the heck out of it. But you could. And what I would do, and now as I think of it, that is something I'm sure I've done because I do have an idea of what to do. And what I would do is pop that in a bowl after, say this was like really dry and I'm like, oh, I added too much flour. You could put that in a bowl, chop it up a little bit, add some water, and get it going again. And that actually is like when I'm doing sourdough. Sometimes I do an old dough method where I have a dough that I make, a sourdough that's kind of small, like a small bread dough that I've let develop over a couple days. Then I'll chop that up, add water, and then regrow it into something bigger. And bread dough is really forgiving, and you can do a lot of additions. Anyway, so lightly oiled bowl, you want to pop your bread dough in there, cover it. You can use plastic wrap. You can use a lightly oiled tin foil. You can use a damp dish towel is kind of a nice way to go. And here I just have some plastic wrap that I had on this loaf. So that dough ball I just made, pretend it is this now, and this is nice and risen, and this is risen really well. It's had more time than the loaf that I baked earlier today, so this will actually be probably a better loaf of bread than the one I'm going to show you, just because it's had plenty of time to sit while I've been talking and setting up the class and stuff, and it's gotten really good and fluffy, and you can see that that with its jiggle there. That's a beauty. So this would go in a 375 oven for about half an hour. If you want it kind of golden brown on top, it may take up to 45 minutes. You just want to keep checking it. And then when you think it's done, go ahead and give it a tap. And if it has that hollow sound, it's good to go. And this should be good. So we have our bread there. The soup is coming along, and you can see we've got some écumé to do here. So this is just from the vegetables giving off some more proteins and so forth. So that's nice to scoop off as well. You just get a little bit of funk. And so this is, it's really nice to just kind of clarify your soup, make it pretty, and get that excess, that's just all these impurities that are coming to the top. And here, now it's nice. I'm going to try to move this over just a tad so we can see what's going on. There we go. All right. So into the oven with this, out of the oven with this, right? And next on our list is show you how to clean up with the bench knife, or sometimes this is called a pastry cutter. And I'm going to bring back my cutting board. And we'll get into the next part of the soup, the grand finale, which is greens and greens, and chicken. So let's do that. Okay. So with the kale, I'm going to put a few leaves here. I've got a couple purple, some green. And so with kale and many greens like this, you can just strip the leaf right off the stem. So I'm going to put the kale in before the cooked beans or the cooked grains, because the kale actually does have to cook a little bit, but it will go really quickly. And once again, this could be spinach. This could be whatever you like, green-wise. Here's my knife. I threw it way over there somehow. So with a leafy green like this, we can do a chiffonade. And I'm just going to kind of stack these leaves up, give them a good twisting, and nice and tight, a nice tight pack. Get my claw in place, which is this left hand. My fingers curled so I don't chop them off. Because I'll need those to eat the bread, right? And I'm just doing thin strips. And then from here, I can cut it across. And when I'm cutting, like chopping like this, I just like to make a fist. Again, just keep my fingers out of the picture. And then it's impossible to cut your fingers if they're not under the knife blade. And it just works out. Okay, so now we have kind of this nice chopped up kale. Throw that in there. And now immediately looks pretty festive. And now, for the next thing, we have our grains. And just have to decide, I don't think I'm going to use all of these at once. Let's go in, I'm going to go in a half of what I have here, because I want to see how thick it's going to become. Yes, we have a question.
Can you freeze grains if you have made too many or you're or something?
Yeah, Mary has a question, and she's asking if you can freeze grains. after you've cooked them and, bring them out later to make a soup. And yes, that's a great way to go. If you cook a lot of grains and you have a remainder, put them in like a Ziploc or a Tupperware, put them in the freezer, and then when you have enough of these ingredients together and you need a little something in your soup, pop one of those grain packs out of the freezer and you're good to go. All of these grains would freeze well, the barley, the quinoa, and the rice. So that's a really nice question. Thank you, Mary P. So I think that's a pretty nice balance. And I love this red rice, so I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to put all this red rice in, I think, and have that be the majority of my grain because it's so pretty and tasty, and then that puts me at a good grain level, I think. And next, last but not least, as they say, we have the chicken. And so this chicken has already been roasted, and let's pretend I had a big roast chicken dinner yesterday, and then I had a little bit of meat left over, the bones, of course, so I made the stock, chopped up that little bit of roasted chicken that was left, and that's ready to go right in the soup. Stir that in and then bring it to temp, and it's pretty much done. I'm going to check it for salt and pepper. And one thing, if you are buying, if you're buying a pre-roasted chicken, say, like from a deli, it is very important to not salt your soup before tasting it, because it could have already been seasoned. Like the chicken I got from the deli was beautifully seasoned, by the way, but it did have salt already in it. So this soup may or may not even need more sodium. Let's check it out. Pretty good. Pretty good. The stock is lovely. It's just a nice light chicken broth. Now with the veggies in there, I can start calling it a broth more, I guess. And could use just a touch of salt, but it's just about there. And then you can add a little pepper. You can add other spices you like. Make it your own. And this would be the point to where you do your final seasonings. You can keep tasting your broth. Use the ladle and then a tasting spoon and get it just right. The vegetables really come through, which is one of the nice things about a soup like this. It has a lot of vegetable flavor, which I really enjoy. Okay, so let's go for it. Let's have a taste. Slice some bread. Be the moment of truth on this loaf of bread, right? That's what we got. All right, so this is a sandwich bread, remember? So this is what we want, this nice kind of tight crumb, which will hold up to the sandwich, to toasting, and it's going to hold up really beautifully to dipping in my soup. And I'm going to slather it with the Lulabelle's butter, which I have here, and nicely tempered. And I'm going to go ahead and just eat this heel because I want that crust. Just a good old slathering of the butter. And again, there's that crumb there, nice and ready for any sort of sandwich action, and definitely ready for the soup. And I do have a bowl, and here I put these chives to remind me to chop them up, and I'm going to put the chives on top of my soup. You can add a bit of yogurt or sour cream to your soup if you like that. Kind of cream it out a little bit in the bowl if you like a creamier type soup. Okay, one more ekume. You can see we continued with the addition of the kale and the chicken. We got a little more stuff to skin. And that technique, it's just once again, this was probably the first classic technique I learned. And I was always excited to help my father out and ekume the soup. And you just want to go in at a slight angle, and all that stuff is just going to jump right into the ladle. And that includes extra oil, little bubbles, and impurities. Okay, I think we're good. And ladle some of this lovely, colorful, nutritious, delicious soup. It's just going to sustain me for a while. You can see it has all the color. We have the chicken. We have all of these things. I have a nice spoon here, which I am going to eat the soup with. And see, usually I forget. And one of the people, my producer, ran over to get me an eating implement, but I was one step ahead today. Yeah, I'm learning. It's only been over a year. But anyway, I'm ready to eat. I have a spoon, and if I didn't have a spoon, I'd still be okay because I have this hunk of bread, and I can just dip and gobble it up that way. All right, what am I forgetting? I'm forgetting the chives, which I had promised to put on top. And that just tops it off really nicely, right? So a lovely soup, the broth just, done over the afternoon, but really no work involved. I just put that cold water to cover my chicken bones and let it simmer really slowly, slow and low. Keep an eye on it. And when the level starts to go down, I usually pick like on a pot, like this pot here has a couple of screws where the handles are attached, and that's kind of where I gauge my level, and so I can tell how far it's going down. And I keep it topped up until I'm getting close to where I feel it's done, and then I'll let it go down a little bit to concentrate the flavors. And once again, you could concentrate it, further if you want, just by taking out the bones and then simmering it longer, and it'll just reduce. And with each reduction, it becomes more flavorful, more concentrated in flavor. But of course, you're losing, volume. So these are things you can work out. I'm going to go ahead and taste. Well, I think I'm going to dip the bread in the broth because that seems appropriate. Yum. Fabulous bread. It's tender and delicious. And the soup has, again, all that flavor of the chicken, the vegetables. It has some really neat textures in there with the greens playing against the little bit more crunchy vegetables. Really good. I might be tempted to even sprinkle maybe a little cheese on top of this, like a Parmesan or something like that, a semi-hard or hard cheese, just give it a little zing. But it's great just as is. Thank you so much for attending this class. Oh, wait, 1 minute. We still have a couple minutes. I forgot the beans. I knew something was missing. So the beans, of course, with the quinoa and the beans, if you're doing this vegetarian style, would be a great way to get some protein in there without the meat. And so the beans, I'm just putting, actually I'm going to put quite a few, and that's why originally I did that on purpose, and that was I was kind of light on the grains because I'm putting both grains and beans in there. So I wanted to leave room for the beans, and then I forgot about it. But there they are. And these are black-eyed peas, which are a great addition to a soup. Beautiful color, wonderful flavor. Yes, we have a question.
Somebody wondered if you could add tofu to the soup.
Oh boy, there's a question. Can you add tofu to the soup? And yeah, yes, add tofu to the soup. If you eat a lot of tofu and have like a remainder, this would be a good way to use up a little bit of tofu. And one of the fun things with a soup like this, like right now, this was a neutral soup, right? I haven't really spiced it in any particular direction. The herbs, sage and thyme kind of do take it in a classic chicken soup direction a bit, but you could take it in any, you could leave those herbs out and put ginger and lime and, lemongrass, put some like, uh, you know, Asian flavored tofu in there, like teriyaki or a Korean marinated tofu, and that would be a whole different direction and also very delicious. Instead of grains, in that case, maybe use rice noodles, and you almost have like a really hearty thaw going on. I mean, really, the there's endless variety with the soup, and that's what's so fun about it. And also, if you are a vegetarian, I'm saying, oh, if you're doing a vegetable version, but of course we have the chicken stock here. You can make this soup with a vegetable stock, either using bouillon. Of course, bouillon. I mean, I use a lot of bouillon. I use a lot of vegetable bouillon, and it's fine. But there's something really special about building a stock, and whether it's a chicken stock or a vegetable stock, and you can also make a vegetable-based stock or broth from scratch. And maybe we'll do a class on that someday. That'd be pretty fun. Okay, so let us end this beautiful time we've had together, and I have a couple things to show you here. This again is a Basics Market production. We're so happy to have you come and join us for this culinary class. We have more coming up this month, and then into next month, more great classes. Please keep looking at the calendar, sign up for classes. We have stores around the Portland area. Visit our stores to get your chickens and your vegetables, and there's a lot of great people working at the Basics Market who love to talk about food and help you out. We have these beautiful recipe cards available in the market for free, and they have the recipes we did today, as well as a variety of recipes, seasonal recipes. We change them every month, and we're always creating new ones. So please check those out, grab some recipes. Also, once again, these recipes are available at our website, as well as a place where you can sign up for future classes, see what's going on. See you next time, and happy cooking.